strange radiation on the X-ray film. Okay, so this is consistent with the three-body alignment effects, where you get a sideways pressure because these things are partially reflected and refracted by solid bodies, and they're gravitationally lensed. They interact with neutrinos with gravity and the weak force, and therefore by proxy with the electrons. And so as it rains down, as for instance, you've got like Betelgeuse shooting out a load of these relic neutrino flux towards, or lensing it towards the sun, and then the sun is lensing that as a lens module towards the moon, and then it's wrapping around the moon. There is stuff coming down which is of a higher density around the outside of the moon, and then on the inside it's getting shadowed. And all life uses this, all random processes use this, all matter use this. Okay, and so you've got a higher amount on the outside, and it's pressure gravity. You've got pushing in from the outside, and that's why your Morris Elias in 1954 on the NASA website has a Foucault pendulum that moves out of sync when it's in three-body alignment, and that's why you have this sideways movement on the plane by Xu Wenju. And so you can have this is the thing about a coherent condensate structure, is you can have two bosons or composite bosons occupying the same space-time, and that is a Bose-Einstein condensate. But you can also have Googleplex. Okay, you can have a Googleplex, and they're still part of the same condensate. Okay, they're still acting as one coherent body. But in some places, it's more alike than others. And this actually occurs with the Earth and the Sun, because these structures are gravitationally lensed, and you get a neutrino sphere around the Sun, and you get a neutrino sphere around the Earth, okay, where it's denser. And the reason things germinate in certain parts of the month, the reason why seeds like to germinate in the spring is because nature knows that we are the side of the Earth that's in its spring is going into a denser flux of relic neutrinos. This same condensate, but there's a denser flux, and all life is using it to transmute elements to do work within it. Okay, and this is some of the work from Simon Schnoll. And so we know we can absorb this stuff. And so if we're shielding it with the moon, we get a sideways movement. And if we're capturing it by having a spinning body, which can include a reentrant jet from a cavitating bubble, you are going to be aggregating these things from the environment. There's going to be a lower amount of them inside here, and there's going to be a higher amount of them outside, and you're going to get diffusion from the outside to the inside. Now, these things don't see normal matter like you or I. They don't see things like normal gases do. So when you have a vacuum vessel, there's always these things moving in and out, like it doesn't care how good your vacuum is, it's going in and out. Now, if you have an electrical discharge in a vacuum, and maybe a magnetic pulsed pinch on there, like the Varchayev devices, it's going to be condensing these structures, these relic neutrinos in there, okay? And then there's going to be a depletion in the environment around it, and therefore, after a period of time, there won't be sufficient to produce these relic neutrino condensates, these key structures for forming the ball lightning, for forming the exotic vacuum objects, for forming the ectons, for forming all these different names that different authors have given exactly the same thing, because they think they've discovered it first. And so this for me here is probably the most important comment I've got today, but it's definitely not the last. You may or may not be happy to hear that, because we're going to get on to the actual point. This is the background. So I want to say it again. After a while, my cavitator stopped producing strange radiation. In order to get it to produce it again, I had to physically move it to a different part of the lab. Okay, and this could explain why certain people's low-energy nuclear reaction experiments don't work in certain parts of the Earth, even in the same time of year, or sometimes only work in the spring, or sometimes only work in phases of the moon, because there is a different flux of relic neutrinos, and the parameter space in their particular experiment might not be flexible enough to continue working with a lower flux. It might need a higher flux. to initiate, because you have to get these clusters to a certain strength before you can get an electronuclear collapse. That is why you want to be technologically producing these, and that's the whole book with there's the whole point about relativistic discharges, disruptive discharges like Tesla used with the disruptive discharge generator. Cavitation is incredibly intense energy, highly localized, and so you get these incredible temperatures. Anything over 1,000 degrees, matter colliding together will synthesize cold relic neutrinos and antineutrinos that can start clustering to form these processes. So cavitation is almost the fastest way to do this. Okay, so I'm now coming to the work of Suhas Ralkar. He was trying to mill off-the-shelf particles to produce an energy generator, and he was trying to get them down to a target size of 5 microns. After milling process, he would desiccate these and grade them to 5 microns or less. The resulting particles would be placed into reactor cores, and then he used greater than 1 megahertz vibration of these particles in corona discharge. Remember what I said about corona discharge? We've got vibration here, we've got corona discharge, we've got something that was cavitating, and we've got metal particles. Note what he said here. In his reactor, if he didn't corona discharge but caused a spark, the core would blow up. It would blow up. So cavitation of metal in water, this makes the charges, the magnetic charges, via cavitation and resonant modes. What am I talking about, resonant modes? Well, I think probably the best way to talk about that is cymatics. I don't really need to go into cymatics. You all know what I'm talking about, okay? And so it almost doesn't matter what your structure of your plate is. It will set up some resonant modes. Now, these things, this is a key point. So let's look at this structure here. These things like to live on a surface, so they like to form in surface boundaries. But if you add sound, then, for instance, if you've got iron or you have aluminium, for instance, you want to make an anti-gravity device using aluminium plates, okay, and you're using discharges, which produces static electricity, which gives you a lot of charge separation, and then you're spinning those plates, which are going to allow you to get towards producing these clusters, and then you are vibrating it. What you're doing is these magnetic monopole, pseudo-monopole structures that are bound to the paramagnetic aluminium are bounced, and they're bounced, and they form on the antinodes where there's no bouncing going on. Now, we've done this every day of the week in a $35 experiment. You can go and find out how to do. A 5-year-old can do it, and it's called Ultra. You use a ultrasonic domestic cleaner you can get it off Amazon, have it delivered in a couple of days, and you can transmute elements using aluminium and water and sound, okay? You get the cavitation, you get the charge separation, and you get the resonant modes, and the resonant modes appear almost instantaneously. We've caught it all on camera, and it's all shared, and you synthesize elements. And it's because you get this, in my view, these charge clusters forming, and you get the charge separation, the intense energy localization, the resonant energy localization at the nodes and antinodes, and you then get this aggregation, and you get these intense magnetic vortices and soliton pairs, phallico-soliton structures. And this is what is going on. If you have an aluminium plate and you're spinning it, and then you have magnets on there, the magnets will do this. They will create vortex pairs. They will create induction effects. And the vortex pairs, because the relic neutrinos have a magnetic component to them, they will condense in these structures. And so you've got the sound creating an assistance to the self-organization, and you have the magnets moving around, also helping with the self-organization, because in the aluminium, it's forming these eddy currents. The eddy currents have a vortical center, so you have another means of aggregating these around the edge. And this produces a cluster that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You cannot see it. You cannot see it because it's moving material in the ether. It's moving material in the ether. And so this produces a large torus, probably 2 tori, depending on what you're doing. And this will produce a gravity shielding effect. It's preventing the action of gravity on the structure that's inside this structure. But things that you approach these kind of things with will not work. Things like phones, watches, any kind of electronics, because they use the Josephson effect, they use tunneling for transistors to work. This will not work. So electronics will not work around the technology that drives UFOs, okay? And it also messes with consciousness, because our consciousness works with this technology as well, okay? So you will have difficulty having a normal train of thought, and your perception of time will be completely distorted, because this is what causes time. Every random changing processes, the progression of time is counted in the change in the environment around you. If you don't have a change in the environment around you, time didn't happen. So if you remove the thing that causes time, then you can't perceive time. And if you remove the thing through which consciousness and connection to reality can work, then you will not have the ability to think in the same normal way that you do. Okay, so anyway, that was a little aside, but I'm talking